Today, we're going to be talking about the transition from the National Mediator Accreditation System to the Australian Mediator and Dispute Resolution Accreditation Standards. Welcome, everyone. Before I proceed, I'd like to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of Australia and recognise their continued connection with land, waters and culture. I pay respects to elders past, present and to emerging leaders. And I come to you today from the beautiful lands of the Gunai people in Gippsland in Victoria. And feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves where you are around the country. I'm Joanne Law, for anyone who doesn't know me. I'm the Director of Mediation Institute. I'm also a Director on the Mediator Standards Board. So tonight I've got two hats on, and also a member of the executive of Mediators Beyond Borders Oceania. And I'm a family dispute resolution practitioner, nationally accredited mediator and a mentor quite often. Yes, but we'll jump straight in. I just want to start off by putting the changes into context. So this is just a really brief history of accreditation stand Australia. So I know some of the people with us today have probably been around as a mediator since before 2000, but that period in the early 2000s, there was a lot of work being done trying to establish a accreditation system for mediators in Australia. I think it started out from a think tank at the National Mediation Conference back there and developed. At the time, we had a government who supported the process with some funding to get things kicked off. And the work was done. So by 2008, 2009, the first standards and the Mediator Standards Board came into being, and that first version of the National Mediator Accreditation System. Australia is unique that we have a national accreditation system and standards. Most other countries, it's quite fragmented and quite difficult for people who want to become professional mediators to know that they are up to a certain standard. In 2015, the then board did a review and the second came out. And then in 2020, it was decided to contract external organisation to do a review of the system at that time, do a bit of an international review and also make some recommendations. So Resolution Resources did that work, and you're still able to access the documents and the recommendations that they made. The Mediator Standards Board at that time adopted a lot of what was proposed, but not all. And so there's been a process of developing the AMDRAS. You might remember there was a slight disruption that happened in 2020 in those years with COVID. So it took a little bit longer than was projected, but it did come to eventually to the point where the draft AMDRAS was put out in August 2023. We had a 6-month consultation period. There was a lot of feedback from various sectors and stakeholders. The board reviewed it all, incorporated what we could, but as you can imagine, there were some conflicting desires in all sorts of different directions. Not everyone got every wish that they had fulfilled, but we did try, and there was some very helpful feedback both from the consultation meetings and the written submissions that came in. All of that culminated on the 1st of May. We published the final version of the AMDRAS and a number of different guides. And the plan is to transition for over 12 months, so from the 1st of July 2024 to the 30th of June 25. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that transition will look like and what that would mean for those of you who are nationally accredited at the moment. Now, if you haven't already downloaded the documents, they're available on the Mediator Standards Board, and my wonderful assistant Roanna in the background there has just dropped the link in, so you're able to go there and get that. So the AMDRAS, it's made up of the document and appendices. There's also guidelines for the transitions and for anyone who's here as part of a training organisation that's either currently recognised or would like to be recognised. There's some guidelines around the certificate of training. There's now a little bit more guidance around a certificate of assessment, and there's a written element in that certificate of assessment as well, for if that wasn't part of how things were done, and of course the transition rules. So, and once again, feel free to make use of the chat if you do have any questions or comments. So the operative date, that's when it starts, the 1st of July. The transition date is the 30th of June. So anyone who's currently enrolled under the NMAS rules from the operative date, or who does enrol during the transition period, will have the full duration that's allowed within the NMAS, or NMAS, if that's how you pronounce it, which is subject to the provisions for their particular training provider, which is 24 months to train, 6 months from the training to assessment, and 6 months from this assessment to accredit. And that, for people who don't enrol until later in the transition period, that would mean that they'd still be under national accreditation rules, should they choose, out past the transition date. Anyone who's currently accredited under NMAS will automatically become a recognised practitioner, accredited mediator AMDRAS, on the 1st of July. You don't have to do anything for that to happen. We know you want to. That will automatically occur. During the transition period, if your renewal is the 2nd of July, it'll be under the national accreditation. The renewals at some point, and it's going to vary for different accreditation providers, who are called currently RMABs, recognised mediation accreditation bodies. They're going to become recognised accreditation providers. At some time during this transition period, they will start offering renewal under the AMDRAS. Nationally accredited mediators will have the option of choosing which one you want to. And then once again, somewhere during this transition period, recognised training providers will have their new AMDRAS compliant courses approved, and they'll be able to start training under the AMDRAS. The change with timelines is that the period to complete training is reduced from 24 months down to 6 months, and the assessment and accreditation periods have remained the same. I will go into a little bit more detail, but if we do have any questions at this moment, just feel free to either raise your hand or pop into chat. So for those of you who are already accredited mediators, it's still going to remain a 2-year renewal period. You're going to need to keep a log of your CPD if you're not already doing that, and also a log of your practice hours, so that you're able to provide that to your recognised accreditation provider, to your RAP, as part of your renewal. So many of you have already been doing that, so it won't be a big change, but a CPD template's going to be provided. Now, the decision was made to reduce the practice hours. It was 25 hours every 2 years, so it's actually reduced down to 20 hours. And that was in response to feedback that we were getting that first 2 years is quite sometimes difficult for people to get their practice hours. That's reduced, and also it's been made explicit that it can include up to 5 hours of intake and preparation work, to make it clear that is part of the process, and also can include up to 5 hours of observing a more experienced practitioner, but also to make it clear it shouldn't be just that. As you can see, the bar's been lowered a little bit, but we're still encouraging people to be doing more than that. And with the CPD, it's remained at 25 hours. So it's 25 hours regardless of what level of accreditation people have. And just in the brackets, it's got how many hours for each category can be claimed. I'll talk about the new levels of accreditation that are coming in, but if people do want to be leading mediators, then at least 10 hours of their CPD needs to be providing professional development to newer mediators. Any questions about that renewal? No, it's all pretty clear. So basically, under the current standards, until your recognised accreditation provider says that they're now accepting renewals under AMDRAS, and then you can choose. Yes, you can definitely receive a copy of the information, and I'd encourage everyone to download the AMDRAS document and just have it as a PDF on your computer as well if you want to keep track. So this is the changes to the training and accreditation framework. So one of the main changes is the levels of accreditation. So at the moment, under the National Accreditation System, there is no distinction, regardless of how long someone's been an accredited mediator or a role. So again, coming out of the research, that was indicated that there was a desire for some levels, and that's resulted in accredited mediator, advanced mediator, and leading mediator. And the difference between the draft we put out and the final version was that we increased the number of hours of practice hours for an advanced mediator and a leading mediator. Yeah, so that's there. We're bringing in the option of non-determinative dispute resolution specialist categories. There was no option for that under the National Accreditation System, NMAS, but the Mediator Standards Board isn't intending to prescribe what those categories would look like. What we're wanting to do is work with groups, specialist areas that believe that what they do is sufficiently distinct from basic mediation to have a specialist category. It's going to be a process. Some of the areas we're looking at is potentially conciliation, if there's interest there, but we're really open to that. It could be First Nations peacemaking, which is again quite a distinct process. That's something that we'll see what evolves from that. But basically, one of the benefits of the AMDRAS is that it provides that flexibility to allow for the sector to continue to grow and mature as is appropriate. Now, the certificate of training, in the past, the requirements for training was 38 hours. It was a prescribed requirement of 9 role plays, 3 as the mediator, and then people to go on to assessment. Now, under the certificate of training course, there's 45 hours of training. There's quite a lot more guidance regarding the theory that's required. One of the issues that was seen with the national accreditation was it was fabulous that it's very practical. However, sometimes the theory that underpins the practice wasn't being taught as much as would have been helpful. So that's really what's being provisioned for, a little bit more of that underpinning theory into conflict and conflict analysis and so on. Same role play requirements. With the assessment under NMAS, it's a 90-minute assessment role play. Under AMDRAS, there's going to be a certificate of assessment that's clearly separate. The independence of the assessment team remains, and it has a theory assessment. It's not, there's some guidelines around that, but it can vary in the way that that theory assessment's done. So it could range from a reflective practice piece analysing the assessment role play to more theoretical written. So that'll probably vary a little bit depending on the recognised training provider's approach to things. And there has been an extension of the duration of that role play. So it's now required to be 2 to 2.5 hours. So it may be that some of the training role plays might extend as well, so that people have got that preparation. That's the main difference for training. If you're already nationally accredited, it won't affect you. If you're currently training and enrolled in a national accreditation course, this won't affect you. You'll be able to apply for accreditation, do your assessment under the current rules. So this will apply for people that are coming into the sector. I guess if you're watching this and you'd rather do it under the old rules, then how's your time? If you'd rather do it under the new ones, then there's going to be a process after the 1st July. Training providers will need to show the standards board that they are meeting the new requirements, and then their courses will be approved for enrolment. So there's not a set day that'll happen. It will need to happen before the 30th of June 25 if they want to remain as a recognised training provider. So I think I do have a few questions, so this might be a good spot to pause and just check. So after 2 years, renewal would include refresher as well as CPD and mediation hours. So, Damien, if people can meet the requirements, if they've done the practice hours and CPD, then that's fine. You're able to renew. If you haven't done either your practice hours or CPD, then you'd need to demonstrate to the recognised accreditation provider that you are still competent. And so that would normally be some sort of refresher training, additional CPD and assessment. Same sort of thing is happening now. What evidence do you need to show for CPD? Again, your accreditation provider may prescribe, or they may already prescribe, that they want additional evidence. Generally, if you've said that you've gone to the National Mediation Conference, I don't know if we'd require the ticket stub.
Yeah, no, I was just curious about what evidence, and can we use the log? I don't have the log. I was going to develop a log, but is the log available for us to start using now, given we're probably going to have to produce it?
Yeah, it is. So if you just download the documents, it's in the appendices of the AMDRAS. It's in Appendix 2. It's got the CPD, it's got the table, and then it's got the log, which is pretty simple. Date of activity, place of activity. I would imagine that accreditation providers may reserve the right to audit. They could ask for further evidence if they had doubts, but I doubt that any of us are going to want to have ridiculous amounts of evidence requirements beyond the fact that you've been able to put down realistic PD. Yeah. And as we had a look,
because sometimes you get invited to things. Like I went to a family law conference the other day and they said, oh, this will count for 1.5 hours. And I was like, how do I know that counts for 1.5? I did want to go anyway.
Yeah.
But I was a bit skeptical just because someone's put it on some sort of training program. Is there going to be some sort of quality assurance? That's all.
Yeah, look, it'll fit within some of the categories. There's no provisions at all for PD providers to have to register with the Mediator Standards Board or anything like that. So I know some law societies or whatever might require that with their PD, but no, we're not intending to go that far. It would really probably just be if something looks very dodgy.
Yeah, that's good advice.
So as long as you're not dodgy, you should be fine.
I'll be fine.
I'm sure you will. And with this, the PD, all courses in the Mediation Institute are appropriate. The webinars and different activities, I went through the list of the different types of things. So there's a variety of activities. It really should not be hard to get 1 hour of professional development a month. 1 hour and an extra hour for good luck. It's only 25 hours for 2 years. Don't disappoint me by saying you haven't been able to do that. With the transition, there'll be a point where certainly Mediation Institute will be letting people that are on current courses, these are your timelines, and we'll have to be mindful of enforcing that. But accreditation providers should have been enforcing these timelines anyway. As far as PD, we do lots and lots of webinars. You're very welcome to come. There's some great ones for some of our NMAS mediators, and we also invite members to run a webinar. You get a couple of hours of preparation for an hour of webinar that you run, and it also puts you in good standing if you are looking at some of the higher levels of accreditation. I just wanted to go quickly through the changes in the theory that's behind the new standards, and certainly we'll be making any new content that we're creating in the process. We'll make sure that we backfill and make sure that our members are up to speed through professional development, small trainings or whatever seems appropriate. The 4 domains: professional knowledge, professional skills, professional ethics and responsibilities, and professional development. This is how the new system is structured. And I'll just go through a little bit of the professional domains and attributes. With the knowledge, there's 25 focus areas, and within those, that's made up of 25 indicative levels of attainment. This system is unique for mediation. It stands apart from the vocational training and accreditation framework, but it does seek to provide a bit more structure and guidance for mediators to really self-evaluate and consider where to focus your attention on your development as well. With professional skills, there's sub-elements, which brings up to 46 different attributes. Professional ethics and responsibilities, again, it goes into some detail, and we'll look at a little bit of that, but the best thing is to download the AMDRAS and just go through that yourself. And then the professional development has got 3 categories. So I'm not going to read through all of this, but these are the 7 professional knowledge domains, and really about understanding conflict, what the drivers and how that works, understanding mediation and other forms of dispute resolution, and having a range of strategies and techniques. Yep. And yes, you could count this webinar definitely for CPD, because you're educating yourself about changes in the system. And the professional skills domain. So this is the things that we'll be looking at in assessment to make sure that you're able to demonstrate all of these things. Unfortunately, the board didn't reach the decision to require a skills demonstration of pre-mediation. We're planning to have that as part of our new training, because we really think it's such an important skill. There's nothing in the standards that prevent a training provider from providing a higher standard of training. It's basically creating a floor that's just lifted a little bit, if that makes sense. Professional ethics and responsibilities. So these go into the way that we need to work with clients and meet our responsibilities. It talks a little bit about the interplay with other legal or regulatory obligations. So we will cede to them. If you're working in a regulated role, conciliation, or a prescribed process, and there's any conflict, hopefully there shouldn't be conflict between the standards and that role. That would take precedence. It would be an interesting thing to look at. And then the professional development, so engaging in reflective practice, so really hoping to try and encourage more of that, and that mediators getting together. It can be supervision, can be peer supervision, professional group supervision, all sorts of ways, but really looking at, because what we do is so often done confidentially, privately, looking at ways to really reflect on your practice, engaging in continuing professional development, and as you develop, contributing to the field through that leadership role, mentoring, supervision of less experienced practitioners. So I suppose getting some movement as mediators develop. This is just showing the progression for those that are interested in progressing from accredited mediator to advanced mediator and leading mediator. For an advanced mediator, 4 years as an accredited mediator, 150 hours of practice experience, and the practicum certificate. If you've had 4 years of accreditation as a National Accredited Mediator, NMAS or AMDRAS, that will count. Practice hours, if you haven't been providing logs, then there might need to be some looking at what evidence you can provide that you have been, if you've been working with others, third-party evidence or something like that. The practicum certificate is designed as a reflective practice program, so it's intended as a group program, fairly intensive. Again, they're not available yet. The various providers will need to develop that and work through that. If you're part of a organisation and they're your accreditation provider, then it's quite likely that they'll be developing those that you can do in-house and meet that requirement if you and they want to have an advanced mediator level. So once the practicum certificates are developed and approved by the board, then there'll be more information coming out about what that specifically looks like. For Mediation Institute, because our focus is on making sure that mediation training's accessible and flexible, it's likely that our groups will be run online, but they will require a pretty solid commitment to meet the time requirements that the Mediator Standards Board's set. Leading mediators, so it's after 10 years in the field, so 4 years as an accredited, as an advanced mediator, or rather 4 years as an accredited mediator to get to advanced, and then 6 years, 50 practice hours as an advanced mediator, and relevant CPD. So you see in the CPD, there was some requirements around providing professional development, providing support for newer mediators. So you can't be a leading mediator if you're just off in your corner, not contributing to new mediators coming through. That's good, I think. Again, as we said, the practice hours have reduced down to 20 hours for accredited mediator and still the 25 hours of CPD. 40 hours for advanced mediators, and that can be co-mediation. All of them can be co-mediation. Same hours of CPD, but just those extra hours of mediation. And people will be able to move between levels. The other thing, I actually haven't got on the slide, but there is the provision for a non-practicing certificate as well. So if people are taking a period of break from working as a mediator, at the moment there's a leave of absence, which is still there, but there'll be a way to capture your practice hours and make it a little bit easier to come back into the sector once you've finished your break, whether you've been off creating a human or working in another area. It's a provision there that was, again, something that was raised. Now, just while we're on this, are there any questions or thoughts about this? If people are doing their FDR course and looking at that as an alternative way to meet the national accreditation components, the transition period will mostly apply to June 25, but there is also still alternative pathways requirements or options for accreditation. So you don't, if you've done different training, if you've come to Australia and trained overseas, that might be able to be recognised as well. So it's just a matter of meeting those requirements. If that applies, download the AMDRAS, have a look or get in touch. But at the moment, it's still the National Accreditation System. Youth justice conferencing, that might be an area where it would need to look at your approach, but it probably would fit through for your practice hours at the moment. And I'd certainly think that conferencing, family group conferencing, youth justice conferencing might be an area of specialisation that could be recognised as well. If there is a specialist category, you don't have to do the 40 hours of basic mediation and then 40 hours of your specialist category. As far as practice hours, it's still going 20 hours of non-determinative dispute resolution if it fits within that requirement. I can take that question back to the board. There's no specific information that's come out about youth conferencing, but a good area to see whether we can provide a answer. And I'm only one member of a board, so I can't promise what I put in comes out in the way I might like it, but I will follow that up. Thank you. There's another question in the chat about intake meetings as part of the practice requirements. You can claim up to 5 hours of intake meetings and preparation in your 20 or 40 hours. So not completely, but some. Yeah, excellent. That's really the main points that I wanted to get through for people. Transitions 12 months from the 1st of July 2024 to the 30th of June 2025. The system overall, it's now more flexible and responsive. The provisions are that the board is able to update the AMDRAS as needed. We're not going to change it on you every week, but if there's major updates that are needed, then we certainly can do that. And it is made up of the core documents and appendices, as well as those additional documents that support it and support the transition. Now, Mediation Institute have put up a page to help. I'll pull that up in a moment. We're putting on some frequently asked questions. So if there's some questions that weren't answered by this webinar, and I'll certainly put up what I can regarding youth justice conferencing, then we'll add those to there as well. So you can email us for more information, office at Mediation Institute, or our number for calling. And we have done a couple of little infographics that might help as well. Here's the website, the documents, or you can download them. So this is what's changing. With fees, it's expected that the new course will be a bit more expensive because of the higher levels of training required. You can download and have a look at this if you would like. These should come down as documents, and it's got the dates and requirements depending on what your category is, whether you're looking at currently accredited or not. Yes, that's that. I'm not sure if there's any more questions. So any more questions before I stop the recording? Okay, thank you for coming along. Thank you for your interest in our system, and I will end that there.